name is Ryan Tapert. I've been playing drums for a good part of 20 plus years. Started at the age of 7. So today, it doesn't matter what type of drums or what genre you would like to play. We're going to cover something today in lesson 1 that is applicable for all genres. It works for pop, rock, jazz, blues, metal, Latin, fusion, funk, country, which is just pop and rock, by the way. What I want to do, and the way that I love to teach drums, is starting with a foundation. When you listen to music and when you start to identify your favorite bands, your favorite drummers, the thing that makes that music and that sound signature is the drums. I think about Rush, I think about the Foo Fighters, I think about the Beatles, I think about U2, I think about Bon Jovi. All these signature bands that have spanned the past 50 years, a part of different genres, have a very distinct sound. And the sound that comes from those bands is built by the foundation of the drums. Now, in most bands, there's drums and then there's bass. We call this the rhythm section. And so as a drummer, creating a foundation and a relationship with your bass player is what makes that signature sound of the rhythm section that all the other instruments will layer on top of. And so what I'm going to talk about today, before we ever even touch a drum set, is a foundation with stick technique, grip, and posture, because that will translate into any genre you want to play. Everything we're going to talk about today and everything I'm going to cover today will apply to that. So we're going to start here, and then in future lessons we can actually get onto the drum set and take what we've learned here, our foundation, and apply it to all aspects of the drum set. So now, I'm not sitting on a drum throne, I'm sitting on this very artsy-fartsy chair that was what I had available in this office space. But typically when we're sitting on our drum throne, we want our legs to be 90 degrees or wider. We don't ever want to sit in a situation where your kneecap is higher than your hip. When we play drums and we go onto the kick drum, you can go on the ball of your foot or the heel of your foot. And so where we get power from with our feet is from our hip, not from our knee. So we want to be making sure we adjust the height of our throne so that we can, when we kick the kick drum, we can pivot from the hip versus the knee or the ankle. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to set the height of my drum throne to be where I'm slightly more than 90 degrees, so when I kick, I'm coming from my hip. From there, now I'm going to set the height of my snare drum. Now on my arm, I want my arm to be almost at a 90-degree angle as well. So you're going to come from the shoulder down to your elbow to your wrist. You want to create almost a 90-degree angle here, because what we're going to be able to do is multiple three pivot points. Pivot point 1 is from the shoulder, pivot point 2 is from the elbow, and pivot point 3 is from the wrist. But if I have my snare drum too low, what's going to happen is my wrist and my hand is now going to go below my leg, and I'm going to have a really hard time. I'm kinking my wrist, and I have a really hard time getting any power or sound out of that. So when we come to our snare drum, we want the bottom of our drum, or the rim of your drum, to be higher than your leg. When you come down and you hit, we want to have space in between your leg and your drum. Oftentimes, a lot of times, when I'm watching my favorite drummers, or I'm watching bands either on TV or in person, I see them hitting their legs. In fact, I have friends that have been in bands where they get bruises on both parts of their legs when they're playing, which tells me they're either sitting too low or they have their snare drum too low. And so you want to, again, sit at a point where you're slightly more than 90 degrees on your legs and have your snare drum higher than your legs. So when you go to play with a 90-degree angle in your arm, you get nice, great space. You're not hitting your legs. Now, when it goes to the rest of the drum set, obviously I don't have a drum set here, but you should set up the rest of your drum set in relationship to your snare drum. The height of your hi-hat, your rack toms, your floor toms. I like to make my floor tom even with my snare drum, so I'm not doing this and I'm not doing this. And then your cymbals. My drum teacher always taught me you want everything to be within an easy reach. Now, I'm sure we've all seen drummers who've set their cymbals up super high, and when they go to him, you're watching them put their arms up. In fact, I've got some video footage I'm gonna show you of me playing when I was younger in some rock bands I used to be in, and I used to do that on purpose. I put my cymbals up really high, so when I'm headbanging and I'm playing my cymbals, it looks very animated, very anthematic. I'm doing lots of this. That's okay, it has a point in time and place, but when it comes to technique and longevity of being able to not develop arthritis or joint pains or discomfort and being able to play for a longer period of time, we really want to start to set up our drum set so that's comfortable. So from here, if I was to pivot my arm out, I don't want to make my cymbal any further away from here, and I don't want to necessarily make it any higher, because now I have to lift up from the elbow. Now I'm putting from the shoulder. Now I'm putting a lot of strain on my shoulder. So same with over here with my left hand. I don't want my hi-hat any further, higher or lower than here, and crash cymbal not too far away to extend out as opposed to up. So when you're playing, this is kind of the sweet spot right here. It may not look the coolest, but it's going to be the most comfortable. And if you over time learn how to set up your drum set properly so that it's the most comfortable, if you watch a lot of or listen to any jazz or fusion players, I'll show you some clips here as well, they do that. They set their drum set up so it's most ergonomical, so that it's the most comfortable for them, so they can play for as long in their life as they can without having any problems. So, enough about that. The last thing I'm gonna say is you always wanna make sure you're sitting up straight, great posture, no slouching. My drum teacher used to put a weightlifting belt on my waist, so when I was at drum lessons, if I started to slouch, it started to dig into my back, and I'd remind myself to sit back up. So you wanna try and do that too. Make sure you're sitting up, good posture, feet, legs, arms, all that jazz. So we're gonna hop into the next section here, which I'm gonna talk about is stick technique. Now, stick technique is huge. I've seen all sorts of people hold their sticks all sorts of ways. So the first thing we're gonna do is the center of your balance of where you're gonna hold your stick in your hand is what we call the fulcrum. So we want to pick a place on the stick that is good for our thumb and our index point finger. So if I hold my stick too far towards the butt of the stick, when I let go of my stick, it just wants to stay down on the pad. Now if I hold it too high on the drum, it's not even going to want to go forward, it's going to want to fall backwards. So somewhere in between the middle and the end of the stick, about 2 to 3 inches from the end, is what we like to call the fulcrum. So if you get a good bounce on there, if you let the stick fall, that's pretty good. I'm gonna hold up a little bit more. Some good bounce on there. That tells me I've got a pretty good balance. Now you can see I've got a little bit of space left on my stick. So now, one of the biggest, most important things that's gonna apply to everything that we talk about in our lessons is what to do with the rest of our fingers. I've seen drummers who just pinch really tight in here on both sticks, and they kind of play like that, or they'll get 1 or 2 fingers in the rogue pinkies. We're not sipping a cup of tea here, we're not doing that. We don't want wandering pinkies. So now that we've got our fulcrum, we want all the rest of our fingers to have a place on the stick. We're gonna use all of our fingers, are gonna help us play. Now, if you were to take your hands, shake them out, and then rest them upside down, and freeze your fingers. My fingers froze like this. You should be able to slide a drumstick right in there, and all of your fingers are now on the stick. And as you can see, I've got a little bit of space. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little bit of space in between my thumb and my pointer finger. That's good. If I'm gripping too hard and that space goes away, we're pinching too tight. You should be able to stick another drumstick in there and have plenty of room. And then first knuckle on all of your other fingers is where the stick's gonna rest. So if I do that in both my hands, and I've got, you can see there's a little bit of stick sticking out on the bottom of the stick there. If I do that on both my hands, again, now we're sitting straight up, 90 degrees with the legs, 90 degrees with our arms. Now we're ready to play. I'm gonna do single stroke rudiment, just left, right, and you will be able to watch how I do it. So first, I'm gonna start with just my wrist. I used to do a lot of exercises when I took private lessons called wrist exercises. It was to keep my shoulder and my elbow straight in place and only pivot from the wrist. It was gonna cause some strain here in your forearm, but that's good. We're gonna build up the muscles. So we're gonna do our single strokes with just the wrist. Good. Now if you're paying attention, you'll see what I'm not doing is stroking the drum and keeping my stick down. What I'm doing is I'm bringing my stick back up at 90 degrees. I'm snapping it back up. And the reason I'm doing that is that's the motion that's gonna help build this muscle. So single stroke, snap back, single stroke, snap back, single stroke, snap back, single stroke, snap back. Now, if you do that over and over again with a metronome, that's another piece that we will talk about in future lessons, but a metronome is the best way for us to keep time. Start at a slow speed and do that for a minute or two, then bump it up 5 BPMs and do it again for another 30 seconds to a minute, and then incrementally speed up. All the while snapping back up to 90 degrees, pointing straight up at the ceiling, and then doubling it up till you can get to a speed about here. Now, once we've mastered our single strokes with our technique, the last thing I'm going to show you today is our double stroke. We're going to try and get two strokes out of our pad with one motion, one up-down motion of the hand. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start in the up position. And when I come down to the pad, I'm going to let the bounce of the pad cause my stick to go up, but I'm not going to bring my arm up. I'm going to let the butt of the stick open up like so with my fingers. Then I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to pull them back in. When I pull my fingers back in, I can hit the pad again. So down stroke, we're going to let the stick go open. And then as I bring my arm back up, I'm going to snap my fingers in to get a second motion. I'm going to do this in more real time so you see what I'm talking about. Open, open, close, open, close. Open, close is the same as up, down, open, close, up, down, open, close. So now we can do that with both hands, and you get something like this. Instead of a single stroke, same motion. So I'm going to bounce back and forth between single and double strokes, and if you were to close your eyes and were visually seeing me, it would in theory sound the same. So here we go. So then you can speed it up and even more. Again, in a further lesson, I'll translate these double and single strokes into a ride cymbal pattern or a hi-hat cymbal pattern. But for today, that's what I wanted to cover, is I wanted to show you posture, how to hold your stick, how to pick a stick, how to find balance in your stick, and then we went over single and double stroke rolls. So I'll send you home with some homework. when you come back next time, we will review what we learned this week in our next lesson, and then we'll move on to the next step of this lesson into the second lesson. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next week.